Review Committee to order, and I can call the roll. Bob Silverthorpe.
Here.
Elise Fordermark.
Here.
Jack Hoffer.
Here.
Ryan Stetcher.
Here.
Vice Chair Neil Shannon.
Here.
And Pat Allen. I'm here. Charlie Harvick, Jennifer Kuiper, and Beth Cook are not here. Did I get everybody? Yes. All right, so has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes, and are there any corrections or changes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Public comments. We don't have public here tonight, so maybe let's stop for a second and talk about that. And see if there's anything we think that we could be doing to generate public interest. I've been trying to post a little bit on a couple of Facebook pages. I know that where people were checking in because they were agitated about Walmart. I don't know if they're checking in there anymore or not. And I know we're getting, all the usual postings and all those sorts of things.
There's last line on my comment in the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Anybody have any ideas of other things that we could be doing?
I personally posted, on Facebook to all my Sherwood friends talking about it and, inviting people and, letting people know, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
You could propose something really, really controversial.
We could say we're going to annex Dundee or something.
We want to do that.
Past history and knowing people that have been here for certain meetings, they have to have something that gets them to come.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a personal involvement in the issue. And I think if there's no personal involvement, people simply are not going to take their evenings to come and sit and hear what's going on.
Right.
So I don't know that there's anything that could be done to further encourage people to come other than what we, Neil's comment in the paper and posting on Facebook and so forth. I think people know that this committee is meeting, and if they were blind to it up till now, getting the ballot and seeing the five proposals on there should wake them up, so they know that something's going on.
And I guess that's maybe what I've been thinking too, is that the vote will really tell. If we end up, getting 5 adopted changes out of 5, then we're on the right track, and whether we have a ton of people showing up or not, maybe isn't a great indicator. If we end up with if we get skunked, then we're clearly on the wrong track, and we need to figure out how to better engage and see, get a better sense of where people are.
Right.
So, all right.
I know that the Budget Committee is trying something new this year, which is we're actually going to have a Saturday meeting. So,
Yeah, because nobody in Sherwood does anything on Saturday.
well, we're trying. Like most committees, I think probably, the planning, you're used to planning, and you almost always have significant, or at least a number of citizens there.
Mm-hmm.
I think most other committees that I've been on have been pretty sparse on public input.
I know the SERPAC never got anybody, and I think that the only reason planning would get people was because a situation was being discussed that they had a personal interest in.
That was always the frustration in planning, is early in the process when the funnel is really wide and you can do pretty much whatever you want. It's really hard to get people engaged when the funnel is really narrow and it's an application of, does this application meet the rules or not, when you don't have a lot of running room. That's when you have a bunch of people who really should have been there at the wider end when,
Right.
it's an ongoing frustration in planning too, even though there's people there. All right, well, let's go ahead and dive in. We've got items A through I, if we can get through it, to talk about tonight. And just to review as much for the video record as anything, we're going to talk about appointment authority for committees. We're going to talk about controlling the order of business. We're going to, which is who sets the agenda for the council. We're going to talk about public hearings, the mayor's veto power, some specific language around hiring and firing authority for the city manager and city recorder. We're going to talk about language having to do with employment contracts, whether we need language about that. We're going to talk about removal from the council for interfering in operations. It's a small subset of a section. talk about language having to do with merit system and employment terms, and then talk about future meeting dates. So that's our task list today. It's pretty long. Let's start with item A, which is the appointment authority. That's Chapter 2, Section 6, which is on the first page. And right, as the current language is the council appoints members of commissions, boards, and committees established by ordinance or resolution. And I think we put this on here because there's been a lot of dust and thunder around that set of issues in the last month or two. And I guess the question is, do we think that language is sufficient, or do we need to put some more structure around it?
I think the issue was that the one I read about anyway was to the chamber, a representative to the Chamber of Commerce, which is not
Established
by ordinance or resolution. So I guess the question is, do we need to expand it to include all groups that the council's asked to have representatives on? And I don't know how many that is outside of the normal.
Well, what I wonder about are like regional and county committees, where they want a delegate from the city and
A metro representative.
for instance,
Right.
yeah.
And I guess there's a transportation.
Isn't there? I'm sorry.
I'm kind of curious how the council, I know they just adopted some new rules last meeting, didn't they? How did, I don't have those minutes in front of me. How did they end up addressing that?
There wasn't any change to obviously the charter or the code. What was changed was the council by resolution would appoint to city boards, commissions, and non-city boards, I believe was the language for outside regional organizations, with the consent of the council. So basically, when the council, for example, when Metro called and wants to appoint somebody appointed to a committee, then that needs to come to the council via resolution, and the full council has to adopt the resolution. So appointments will be made by resolution with the consent of the council.
So really, we're not proposing much of a change to the charter, except that maybe considering, broadening the scope a little bit to identify representatives of the council.
Well, what we could certainly do is simply consider adopting what they've adopted by rule as a charter
Same
provision.
language, yeah.
Why don't are we comfortable with maybe having Sylvia put that in our first red line, and we can take a look at that and see if we.
Well, I have a quick
that
question.
makes sense. Yeah. please.
Isn't there on some of the commissions charters, I guess, doesn't it say something about the mayor appointing the commission members?
There has been inconsistency with process and with language. We have various code in our municipal code for planning, parks, library. Cultural arts and SERPAC does not have language in the code.
Right.
And in there, on occasion, you'll see language that says the mayor will appoint. In other places, it doesn't state that. Past practice, the practice of the city for the last at least 14 years that I've been here, is the process of applications were received. The chair, the staff liaison, the council liaison did an interview process. That panel made a recommendation to the council, to the mayor, made a recommendation to the mayor. At that point, the mayor who sets the agenda would indicate, please put this resolution to appoint this person on the agenda, and then that resolution would come before the full council. So that's been the process. So the language of the mayor will appoint has been misunderstood to say the mayor is going to appoint you and you and you.
Right.
When in fact, it doesn't spell out the process.
Yes, I think that had been a concern. People who have been here were talking about, the mayor appoints people, and which has never been the case, at least in my experience with Cultural Arts
Right.
Commission. And I don't know if we have this language in the charter, do those commissions then need to go back and look what their, charters or whatever code
Their
says,
process, they need to change their process.
so that it reflects that it's actually the council that appoints rather than the mayor?
Correct. And that was one of the discussions that we've had at the staff level is the inconsistencies. You have charter, you have council rules, which can change, and then you have municipal code, which can also change. To look at, once this process here with the council rules, which are changing, and potentially the charter, for staff to recommend language in the code. The code is not necessarily something that has to be adopted by vote of the community, it's vote of the council. Council amends the code by ordinance. To make the language for all the boards and commissions consistent, from term limits to the fact that they are appointed by resolution. The question is, where is that process written? Is the process written in code? Is the process written in policy? Do you get down into the weeds with putting process in charter and council rules? Where is that process noted? But we have discussed, and it's something that I'm currently working on now, is gathering all the language for all the boards and commissions so that we can address that.
And in practice, really, what's even the thing that the way it's been done has been much more like the mayor nominates and the council appoints. It's not ever. I don't think it's ever really been the mayor.
And it's not even really the mayor nominating, just because
Right.
it goes through an application process. I mean, I think it just needs to be consistent throughout so that everybody in the community understands that it's not, nobody's being handpicked to be,
Right.
on commissions and boards. So,
And that's basically the issue I have. I want to make sure the council is the final authority.
right, I
on,
agree.
on the appointment of members of the commission rather than an individual.
I agree.
All right, so we're going to take a look at language that will come back that will mirror the language the council adopted in rule, and see if we want to include that as charter language. The next one is control of the order of business. That's Chapter 3, Section 8, which is on page 2. Actually, it's the bottom of 1 and the top of 2, which currently reads, the mayor presides over and facilitates council meetings, preserves order, enforces council rules, and determines the order of business under council rules. The mayor is a voting member of the council. Mayor must sign all records of council decisions and serves as political head of city government. So it's really that first section, and it determines the order of business under council rules. And I think the idea of bringing this one up was to talk about the notion of, does everyone agree that means the mayor has unilateral authority to control the agenda, and and are we fine with that? Do we want to consider whether there should be some ability, if a majority of the council wants to cause an issue to come up, that does it have the ability to do that? Which has got some complications around notice requirements and those kinds of things. So it's not a straightforward issue, but I think that's the issue to lay on the table and talk about.
Sylvia, remind me, didn't the council just change that too, where it's now the mayor and the council president?
That's correct. So that was in addition, a change to the council rules that indicates the mayor and the council president would set the agenda. And there was an amendment. It originally indicated mayor, council president, and city manager, and the amendment the night at the floor was to remove the city manager and just have mayor and council president.
Well, I guess I would think that if a subsequent mayor did not want to follow that rule, he or she wouldn't have to, right?
And kind of that's the question around the rules is, what's the penalty if they're not
Who
followed?
enforces it?
Well, the mayor's supposed to enforce the council rules.
Right, it says so right there.
Yeah, but what I mean is, I don't think a rule can take authority away from somebody that's granted them in the charter.
No,
Correct.
that's correct.
Where there could be, I think most of the things about the rules aren't like that. They're more procedural kinds of things, and you would have to follow them because they're being more specific. But that rule would actually take authority away, which interesting. I guess I'm kind of bothered by the notion that a majority of the council can't cause something to come before the council, if that's what a majority of the council wants.
And usually,
But they can. That process occurred actually in one of the last meetings where there were amendments made to the agenda by the mayor within a day of the meeting, and council by motion, majority of the council added items back onto the agenda. So the council can, by action, a majority of that action, request business or conduct business.
But does the charter say that?
Charter doesn't say that.
But Robert's rules would allow them to amend the agenda at the time of the meeting.
But not if, Robert's rules only applies if the charter itself doesn't say something more specific, I think.
And if
Well, yeah, I mean, I am a little concerned that the language is authoritarian.
Mhm.
And I would certainly like to think that we're a little bit more civil or open-minded in bringing forward ideas, even if somebody is against it.
Yeah, I would agree, Neil. I think that, I don't like the authoritarian mode of it. I think that the council should have the ability, if there's something that they feel needs to be in there, that they should have the ability to vote and put it on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I would hate to have the mayor hold up the city charter and say, this says I have this power, therefore I exercise this power.
Well, I think that's what happened at a meeting
Yeah,
a month or so ago.
Yeah, I'm not sure he held anything up, but he sure exercised the power.
Yeah.
But Sylvia, you're saying that if they put a motion up, they can add things back onto the agenda as it is.
Pretty much any elected body can do that at this level when it's not a land use or something that requires something more. If there's a majority to do something, absolutely.
And it doesn't matter that it says in the
Well,
charter.
it does, it does matter, because pretty much the charter would supersede Robert's rules, and that process of a majority of an elected body being able to make a decision is a Robert's rules. So if it's noted in the charter would supersede.
Well, is it unreasonable just to take that part out and rely on council rules to,
One thing to keep in mind, and where it says determines the order of business under council rules, in the council rules, it has the order of business being pledge of allegiance, roll call, consent agenda. So it's kind of the standard items that you see on an agenda. So that is the order of business.
it's not the actual
It's
agenda?
not the actual agenda or the business items on the agenda. So for example, the order of business, this is one thing that was recently discussed as well, was public comment. The mayor can choose to have public comment or not have public comment. And where do you have public comment in the order of business? So that was one of the items that was discussed when the council looked at revising their rules, was to have it somewhere, but who determined where? And if it's in the rules, that it's the fifth item on the agenda, that evening on the floor, can the mayor or the council decide, because there's a topic and there's a lot of people, to move that business item up on the agenda? So to have that flexibility, but that's what that order of business is the standard order of business of an agenda.
So how does stuff get on the agenda?
The process, unwritten process, is right now, the mayor meets with staff, city manager, myself, and assistant city manager once a week, once every other week, and reviews the business that staff puts on an agenda forecast. An agenda forecast is a shared document amongst all the management staff, and that agenda forecast is a 6-month forecast. So it has all the various council meeting dates. Staff plugs in their business. Once a week, the mayor will meet with staff and go over that business. Once the mayor says, this item's great, everything, or we need a work session on this item, or we want more information, move that out to June 1. So that's kind of how the business of the city gets before the council is through the mayor. So currently, when Mayor Middleton came on, he chose to have an additional council person with him, the council president. So it was the mayor and the council president who would now attend those weekly meetings. Prior to Mayor Middleton, that was not the practice. It was solely just the mayor.
So I guess I have a suggestion to try out and see what people think. And I would, so the order of business language under council rules sounds like it's fine the way it is, because that's just the order that you do things in. But I think we ought to consider adding some language that says something like, a majority of the council may cause an item to be added to the agenda of any meeting or to the agenda of a future meeting if needed to meet requirements for public notice. So if 4 councilors want to bring up an issue, they can either add it to that agenda, or if it's something that would require notice, they can cause it to be added to a future agenda so that notice can happen.
That certainly would establish clarity.
Well, and it would keep us from being in a place where whatever the unwritten process is, that unwritten process can't be used to bottle something up, which is what I'm concerned about. And that's why it's a majority of the council. That way, it's not any one person can do any old thing and hijack stuff, right? public hearing.
I like that. I think something like that should go in here.
Definitely adds value.
Jack, Brad?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, the only thing I'm curious about is, we really don't say how the agenda's set anywhere, and I don't know that that's important to be in the chart, the exact details of the chart, but if all this is, all the meaning of the order of business is just to figure out where things go, that really doesn't talk much about your unwritten process that you have in place right now. And I don't know where that should be, but setting the agenda is fairly important. You obviously can determine the tone of meeting by whatever agenda.
Yeah, and that language that I just read actually probably goes better under Section 7, council,
Right,
rather than under Section 8, mayor.
right.
Well, so let's take a look at that in our red line and then think more on the general issue about anything we want to capture procedurally for setting the agenda. I guess my off-the-cuff reaction is, as long as we have a safety valve that a majority can get something on the agenda, it almost doesn't matter how the agenda gets set, right?
That's true.
But that's what I think now. I might do something different later. Okay, let's move on to the...
Well, do council rules talk to setting the agenda at all?
The recent amendment was just that the mayor and the council president would set the agenda.
But they don't talk about the process at
No.
all, going,
No, it doesn't go into
working with the
detail.
city manager.
And 2 is better than 1, but it's still
Mm-hmm.
small, right? You could still, those 2 could
Right.
thwart the will of a majority, in theory.
Yes.
All right, let's talk about C, the need for public hearings. This is Chapter 4, legislative authority, and this was when we were going to get some. Were we going to get some research on this one? I can't remember. The minutes would probably tell me.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Oh, this is the question of. It doesn't seem to actually say anywhere when you do have to have a public hearing. Land use is covered by state law, which requires public hearing, but ordinances and resolutions under the city charter, unless we missed it before, didn't have any requirement for public hearing.
Is land use the only thing that requires a public hearing at this point?
In state law.
In state law, and I believe in budget law, there might be something that
Probably so.
pertains to raising of fees or taxes. Also requires public hearing.
But the budget itself does not?
The budget document?
It
I
does.
believe the budget document does.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this would be in addition to language that's currently in here. It's not stated right now about, unless I'm missing it here, about the need for public hearings. So we're talking about adding something.
Adding something.
Yeah, I'm thinking that section 16 ordinance adoption A, where it talks about adoption of an ordinance requires approval by a majority of the council at one meeting, provided the proposed ordinance is available in writing to the public at least 1 week before the meeting, comma, and after conducting a public hearing.
Well,
On the matter.
how many ordinances go through every month or year? What's the?
On a calendar year, you have about 12 to 15 potential ordinances that are done, that come before the council. So current process, that language that Chair Allen just read, is a one reading of an ordinance. A lot of jurisdictions in the state have 2 readings of an ordinance. They'll read the title and have it available at one meeting, and then hold a public hearing, and then at the second meeting, they would read the title again, and then choose to adopt it or not adopt it at that second meeting. Because of our charter, the way it reads, that 7-day period is whenever I have, or this council has an ordinance on the agenda, I have to post the agenda 7 days, so that the public is aware, and I have to have that document, even if it's in draft form, from staff available if somebody asks for it. So that's how we meet that requirement of that 7-day, having that legislation available.
Neil, was this something that I remember you talking about, you saying that
Well,
something
you know,
had
I
happened that you
do
had
have, I have
there
a
was-
fairly strong advocacy of allowing citizens to, you know, make the council approachable. And, you know, ordinances are laws which affect the entire city. And, yeah, I seem to think that if you have an issue that you want to be able to say, you should have that opportunity. Now, resolutions are basically just how we conduct business. You know, a resolution is appointing someone to a council position, or, you know, signing a contract for XYZ. amount of work.
Congratulating the Maid Marian Court.
Right.
I mean, any
Right.
number of things, right?
Right. But, I mean, an ordinance, you know, it carries more power, enforceable by law. It does seem to me that there at least should be an opportunity to be heard. Now, ordinances are, I don't think I've ever seen one on the consent agenda.
No.
That they wouldn't be.
No.
Now, when you say that you, even in draft form, they have to have it available, that doesn't necessarily, though, mean that you put it into the council packet.
No.
So it's not necessarily downloadable unless somebody walks up to the counter.
Or someone sends me an email saying, I saw the agenda, there's no packet, you have an ordinance on there, I want to see the ordinance.
Okay.
And
I
that's
think
how
I've probably done that.
Yeah, and that has happened.
How far in advance does council get to see the ordinance?
Generally, what happens is the council will see the packet, the complete packet. We don't piecemeal it and send it to them in pieces. Wednesday or Thursday prior to a Tuesday meeting. So that's, again, the packet's produced, it's on the website. Once it's on the website, the council is provided an electronic copy, and then generally a paper copy will follow in the mail within a couple days.
What's the next step after this? So it says here that it is available in writing to the public at least 1 week before the meeting. What normally happens next? It's available in writing. Is that, anybody look at it, or?
Absolutely, we have to meet that requirement, that it is available in writing.
Right.
What will happen is similar to your minutes, it'll have draft on the document. So I have that document. It's not formatted yet. Maybe there's not a legislative number assigned to it yet. It's draft form. But the gist of most of the language is going to be there. Mm-hmm. So when I provide that to the public who's asking for it, I don't put it out there unless it's asked for. What I put out there is the agenda, and the agenda has to have the proper title of the ordinance. So I can't just put an agenda out there saying amendment to code. I need to put a chapter number or what the amendment is. And then when someone sees that agenda and they call me, Sylvia, I need what are you amending? What's the language? I have to provide that. And then at that time, I'd communicate that it's draft form. It's you have what you have. That's all I can give you right now. A lot of times if it's draft form, what we're waiting for is the formatting. We might be waiting for legal to give their final review of it. So there's a couple items as to why it's not 100% quite yet.
Okay.
So I guess I'm still inclined to think, I'd at least be interested in our looking again at language that caused 16A to read, adoption of an ordinance requires approval by a majority of the council at one meeting, provided the proposed ordinance is available in writing to the public at least 1 week before the meeting, comma, and further provided the council has conducted at least one public hearing on the matter.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's,
Yeah.
because I'm more accustomed to the process she laid out where it's published, the title's published at one meeting, and then there's a public hearing, and then it's voted on the next meeting. That's what I'm accustomed to in other places. So.
Well, this wouldn't, I mean, what I'm
I know.
proposing wouldn't try to change the
Right.
timeline. You could still do the 7 days and then have the hearing, but mainly like you do with land use stuff where you have the hearing and you either take action or you don't, but you're able to take action once you've done it.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of think, kind of echoing what Neil said a little bit about this, this is a law after all. I think the smooth ordinance needs to be available prior to the public hearing, though, by a day or two. But it ought to be you ought to be able to walk into the public hearing with that, at least know what you're commenting on.
So the current language with the 1 week would do it or would not do it?
Wouldn't do it.
Wouldn't do it, okay.
Well,
It's
not the way Sylvia currently interprets it,
Okay.
because what she's doing is putting a draft up there, even though it contains all the guts of the ordinance. It's still. I'm a little shaky with that. Because
Okay.
lawyers change things.
Mm.
So I would rather see it in a smooth form after a legal review, ready to go to vote. And that will slow it down. But if it's an ordinance, it's probably important.
Well, I'm thinking when it gets posted as a draft, the only thing that changes it from that is council action at the meeting where they're considering it, right?
I'm sorry, when it gets posted as a draft?
Oh, maybe I didn't follow. You're saying that it could be changed substantially between the time it gets posted and the time council actually takes it up?
Correct. And when you say gets posted, I don't post. It's available to me. Because of that language that's in the charter, I have to have that document from staff available 7 days prior of a council meeting if the public asks me for it.
But it might not be a final document.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that is really different than land use, where we get the actual honest-to-God staff recommendation and report, and it's posted 7 days before the commission takes it up. The commission may well change it, but there's something for the public to see that is what's going to come up on the agenda. What would be what practical challenges would that cause if that was the standard for the council for ordinances?
I don't know about challenges to the council. I mean, you have code. If an ordinance needed to be adopted immediately, there is a provision where they can, by emergency, adopt it. And when there is that language, by emergency, that kind of washes this language of the 7-day noticing. Usually that has legal review, and but it has to.
And then does it expire after a time certain?
It's not necessarily, unless it indicates there's an expiration on it. But when something, the council can declare by emergency and not follow that 7-day noticing requirement of that ordinance posting.
And they do a lot of things with an emergency clause, don't they?
Not a lot. I'd say on an annual basis, you might have 1, maybe 2 ordinances a year that might have emergency.
But they're the judge of what's an emergency, right?
They, and or legal.
A lot of times it's been fiscal, something has to be done by this day period. I've seen it.
Or legal reasons.
Well, I was going the other direction, which is in the legislature, a great many bills have emergency clauses because we need them now, not because there's an actual emergency.
And part of the emergency, it does require a unanimous vote. Any one counselor could stop the emergency process.
Go ahead, John.
Sorry I'm late and I'm jumping in here, but another way, and I'm not suggesting we do this, but one of the ways that other cities do with ordinances is there is a first reading and a second reading.
Yeah, that's what
We don't do that here.
Well,
We're not unique in that regard. But when you do a first reading and a second reading, it allows you at the first reading to make modifications and bring it back for the second reading. I mean, it kind of slows the process down. So when you're creating law, it takes at least 2 meetings for the council to enact laws. Now, they can waive that if it's an emergency, and we used to do that in Fairview. It'd have to be a unanimous vote that we need to act on this tonight, but that was rare. And that's another way of looking at, and I could bring back examples of charters that have those. That would be a major shift in terms of how we adopt laws, but that's how other cities tend to adopt ordinances, through a first reading and a second reading.
And not necessarily bad one. I mean, I agree, it slows it down a little bit, but, I mean, how many people, I know I occasionally watch the council on TV rather than coming down here, and, it at least gives, it's a notice opportunity. You've been noticed that council's talked about this, and we're going to look at adopting it. So it is I think, a powerful consideration.
I think it's a much fairer, far more fair to the public to do it that way.
And I guess I'm catching the tail end of the conversation, but the sense is I'm getting from walking in late is that sometimes ordinances could be adopted very quickly and the public doesn't have a chance. You're creating law, local law, and
with little access to what's actually going to be considered and then no opportunity to comment.
so all I'm suggesting is I can bring back to the committee some sample language processes from other jurisdictions that do the first and second reading.
So I'd be interested in seeing maybe two different flavors of that. One would be first and second reading. The other would be stronger language that what gets put out there 7 days ahead is the actual thing that's getting.
Sure.
Personally, I don't know that I need the council to do it twice, as long as the public has a reasonable period of time to see the actual thing that's being considered.
Would the committee, in addition to that, just have language that all ordinances are required to have a public hearing?
Well, that's actually where we started this. That started this.
So to kind of have that, and then if there's additional procedures or timing, then that would be spelled out either there or elsewhere.
I think from a staff perspective, or at least my perspective, that's always this question: should we have an ordinance when we're doing an ordinance? Should we have a public hearing or not? And to me, you're creating law. The public should have a right to be heard, and it may be as simple as what the city recorder is suggesting, adding that language. So.
And I think that's pretty much where the committee already was. We just got a little bit sidetracked or further into the conversation of, well, it's great to have a public hearing, but now we've got to have a knowledge base to be able to address that public hearing. And right now, that knowledge base is I have to knock on your front door and ask for what documents you may have. Whereas if you have 1 and 2 readings, it's now gone before the television, it's gone into the minutes of the council, it's become more available for download, so you have a greater knowledge base if somebody actually wanted to address that at an ordinance or on a hearing.
All right, so we know we want to have a public hearing requirement. We want to see some language back to try to deal with what are people able to see, to whether it's the 2 meetings or notice or whatever. Okay. Mayor veto power, Chapter 4, legislative authority, and it's on the top of page 3.
If we put the process in place so the public has an opportunity, I don't think the mayor needs a veto authority. If the public doesn't have an opportunity, then I think.
Well, it is interesting that if a mayor opposes an ordinance or a resolution, it would have to pass by at least 4 councilors anyway.
Unless you're dealing with a short council, which we talked about.
That's true.
Right.
That's true.
So the only thing I can see that it allows is it allows a mayor who's part of a majority of the council on a day when less than a majority of the council shows up to keep that minority from doing something the majority would have opposed.
Yeah, it allows them to bring it back, basically.
Right.
A redo.
Right. Presumably when the full majority is there. I guess that's a substantive process check.
Never been used. At least, not that I've heard of.
Personally, I'm okay with leaving it in, and I think, just as stated before, it's another check and balance, and it's not that it's the ultimate veto gone. I mean, it still has the opportunity to come back to have the council, overrule that veto. I don't think it's a bad idea for, the mayor to be able to stop it and say, okay, here's why. Let the counselors, think about it some more. If they need more information to come back, and if they vote the same way again, then that's it. But I'm okay with the idea of the mayor having a veto power.
Yeah, that does bring up the other thing that it does provide is it provides a platform for the mayor to send a political message about the strength of his or her feelings about a particular issue, and then make the council do it again if that's what they're gonna do. Leave all
Okay
of
with
it
it.
alone.
I don't see a need for changing anything.
Okay. So we'll capture that discussion in green or blue or whatever our language is, whatever our color is for stuff we talked about and decided to leave be. Okay, that gets us to section 33 and 34B, which are on pages 5 and 6. Oh, and this is the part where it says a majority of the council must appoint and may remove the manager. The appointment must be made without regard to political considerations and solely on the basis of education. And I think the point was, it says the appointment must be made without regard to those, but evidently the firing can be with regard to those, which I think is a grammatical artifact. And we could fix that simply by saying the appointment or removal must be made without regard to political considerations. Mm-hmm. I don't know, is a city manager ever removed and it doesn't have to do with political considerations?
Yeah.
I suppose that's right. I suppose there are cause embezzlement or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, it happened once before. Remember, they removed John Gourmet.
That was when we first moved here. No.
They didn't like the way he was managing the city.
Political considerations.
I was at that meeting, actually.
Does that fix work for people?
Yes,
Just add removal, and then that would be the same
for the city.
for 34B for the city recorder.
I think I do recall from earlier discussions, I don't know if it's worth discussing item C there, as far as whether or not you felt that the manager needed to be a resident of the city.
Oh, we did want to talk about that, I think, didn't we?
Right.
Always a healthy debate.
It is, I mean, it's, you know, and I understand the conflicts, I mean, particularly if you're hired from, say, a local city, and kids are in school, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, your best candidate is the chief financial officer in Beaverton, who has, you know, a junior, a freshman, and an 8th grader.
Right.
Right.
And who has no intention of moving, although he'd like to serve. So, I don't know.
Residency requirements are kind of passe, aren't they?
Well, I think in rural communities
They're still around.
yeah.
Are they?
They're not as much as in the past, but they're still common enough. It's, when you're looking at a job announcement, you're always looking, is there a residency requirement or not? And it varies. Different parts of the country is more common than others.
What's the status in the metro area generally?
Generally, there is, again, I haven't done full research, but I don't believe there's many residency requirements. There is some charters that it's encouraged. There's language in the charter that encourages the manager to live within the community, but doesn't require it. I mean, this is a wonderful community. Most of your managers, I believe, that have worked in the last 15, 20 years have lived here. If you have a choice, one of the reasons people are attracted to the job is the schools here. So, I mean, if you had a situation or a problem where you had a lot of managers for some reason not living here or wanting to live here and being involved in the community, you might want to address it. But I don't think you have that issue here, and I don't see that changing in the near future. And if you do have a residence requirement, you miss out on good candidates who, the Beaverton example. Well, they have a residency requirement. I'm not even going to throw my hat in because I'm not moving my family.
For the record on TV, I have no idea who the CFO in Beaverton is. So.
I do. So.
I'm comfortable leaving it alone, but I just wanted to make sure we discussed it.
Usually I've seen folks that try to add that in communities where they have a problem where the manager, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to be on a consistent basis living in the community they work in.
Invested in the community.
Well, and in point of fact, if I understand right, you had to be a couple of minutes late because you were at a parent-teacher conference here in town. So it's clearly not the issue we're dealing with at all. I'm not hearing anybody jumping up and down that we need to fiddle with that.
I'm going to leave it the way it is. We could come up with a lot of reasons to leave it the way that it is and not require that they be a resident of the city.
That's where I'd All right. Item F is language referencing employment contracts. This would be under Chapter 8, appoint of officers, which is on page... Starts on the bottom of page 5. Well, it's the overall section, and it's the notion, and I think this was Jennifer's actually, that there's really nothing in here that envisions there being an employment contract, and does there need to be? Check the minutes and make sure I've got that right. Oh, no, actually, it was Council President Henderson who raised that issue. So, Linda, were you thinking it would be language like the council may execute an employment contract with appointed officials or something like that?
For
Manager, recorder, attorney, judge.
Are you talking about 33B?
No, this was just in section 8 generally. In the meeting last time, you raised the issue that we don't have any language pertaining to employment contracts.
Oh, yes.
And you were talking about if you're dismissed for cause, remedies, those kinds of things.
Right. I'm not sure where we would.
And while she's thinking and reflecting, just common practice or practice currently, I have a contract, the city recorder has a contract. We do not have a contract with the city attorney's office that I have been able to find. I mean, we've used the same firm for many, many years, but I don't believe there's actually a contract. There is from years ago.
Yeah, like 10 years old.
And then we do not have contracts with the judge. They are appointed by resolution, though, so there is council action, but there's not an actual contract with the judge that I'm aware of.
So for the city attorney and the judge, who are those contracts authorized by the council by
Yes.
resolution?
Yes, that's the way it should be.
But it's not an employment contract, it's just a services contract?
Well, it could be either, I think.
Could be either. Could be either. I mean, I think for the city manager position and the city recorder, it's with an individual. It's a contract.
Right, correct.
With the city attorney's office, it's with a firm.
So it's a service.
Or it could
It's
be
a
an
service. Or it could be an employee. Yeah, if we went in-house for an attorney, we could still have a contract with that attorney.
And I think this has maybe been created an opportunity for confusion. The language reads like the city manager and city recorder language does, in that it's in the singular person kind of a context.
Yeah, I've seen some other, again, charters that provide clarity in terms of the city attorney's office could be an individual or through a contract with a firm, the either or.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking is we could, after the sentence, the office of city attorney is established as the chief legal officer of the city government of the city. That's an upward sentence anyway. The city attorney may be a direct employee of the council, or may be, or the services may be provided to the city by by a firm under a contract adopted by the council.
Because
Something
the
like
way
that.
it's written here, it assumes it's an employee.
Right.
And that's one of the criticisms of a frequent critic of the city is our so-called contract attorney. And there's, at least in his eyes, we're violating the charter. I don't believe that's the case, but if the charter had that clarity in it, that wouldn't be a outstanding question, so to speak.
So that leads to the substantive question of, do we think the city attorney should be a city employee
As opposed to a contract.
as opposed to contracting with a firm?
Well, we have more than one attorney.
Hmm?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have multiple attorneys. I mean, our current situation is Beery, Elsner, and Hammond provide the basic legal work, but we have a labor attorney that's separate. We have a bond attorney that's separate.
Well, but neither of those would carry the charter authority of the city attorney.
That's correct.
Well, and depending upon other situations that might come up, you might want to use other attorneys in the office, right?
Yes. And there are cities that have in-house legal staff that still use outside firm. Just I mean, the law is very complex. And so again, I can bring some language back for your consideration to at least look at. You may not want to go there, but I think clarity around the city attorneys, thinking about that
I
might
think
be helpful.
This is poor language as it sits right now, for sure.
And while we're talking about the city attorney, that reminded me that the last mayor's recommendation, there was that confusion or bad, just nobody knows what it meant. The attorney must appoint, supervise, and may remove any office employees.
Well, that would be, because the section starts the office of city attorney.
Right.
So that means
They're
the city,
establishing an office.
the city attorney gets to fire his or her staff.
Sharon, one additional thing to possibly consider is, I recently saw this in the municipal code. It references the judge, municipal judge, and a hearings officer. And those two would be appointed by the council as well. It doesn't reference contract, it just says by appointment. Where the hearings officer sometimes gets lost because it's not noted anywhere other than in the code.
Well, and the municipal judge really is an actual individual person, right?
Yeah.
Currently, correct, yes.
Well, we have two, don't we?
We have a regular, and then we have actually two pro temp
We have pro
to
temps.
fill in
Mm.
when the regular can't be here for whatever reason. Sylvia makes a good point about the hearing. That's an important position, and it's the council. It's just not in the charter, it's actually in the code.
So that would be the judge section is quite extensive. The hearing officer section could be quite a bit more limited, right?
Potentially. But I'm assuming, and I could be wrong because I've never looked into it, that do we have a contract with our hearing officer that you're aware of? Sylvia?
I have not seen one, no.
We may, but
Just to cover a billing rate or a verbal contract, if nothing else.
Do you typically use the same person as the hearing officer?
I just have questions about Section 37, compensation.
Yeah, we're not there yet. It's next on the list.
Okay.
So yeah, bring back to as I'm sitting here back on the city attorney language, and even what the city attorney does is not even very clear in this language. So if you could bring back some better language out there, and language that specifically envisions using a firm under contract that authorized
I
by the
think the
council.
either or is important.
Right. Yes.
Really, and that debate has been ongoing actually in the last year, both among counselors and staff.
Yeah.
Do we make a change and go in-house? Because when you look at cities, our neighbor cities that are comparable in size to Sherwood,
Mhm.
so Wilsonville, Tualatin, Newburgh, all have in-house attorneys. So I think
Yeah.
You're going to change some language. You
Have
want
to be able to do both,
You
sure.
want to have both.
Right.
And give the council that flexibility.
Okay. So we want to see better city attorney language that includes the ability to do contracted services. We want to see some language that would add the hearings officer, and then again on the flexibility to do contracted services on the municipal court judge. Does that track with everybody?
But we need to go back to employment contracts.
I'm not hearing that we ended up. Linda? Did you come up with anything that you were thinking about in terms of employment contract language with respect to city manager, city recorder, or any other any other position that would have one? We can always come back to it at another meeting if.
I mean, I think it's important to if we're going to change the charter or amend the charter, to keep it flexible. You know, in a lot of municipalities, the city recorder doesn't report to the council; they report to the city manager or the head administrative. We're actually very unique. I like that fact, but most people don't have that situation. So,
Well, in terms of flexibility, not having contracts referenced in the charter is the most flexible
right.
thing, right? Because that leaves you the flexibility to simply have them be an at-will employee if you can sell somebody on that. All right, well, let's leave that as a no change unless we circle back and discover something that we think we need to capture on that. And then the compensation issue. And this is 37 and 38 on page 8. And Linda, you were thinking,
Well, it says the council must authorize the compensation of city appointive officers and employees as part of its approval of the annual city budget. For example, if we had an employee like the attorney, we don't do that. I mean, we review them once a year. We make a recommendation for a salary increase, yes or no. They're eligible for a COLA. I also don't know why the mayor and councilors may be reimbursed for actual expenses. I don't really even know why that line's in there. I mean, I think that would be either covered under council rules or covered under council, not under compensation as a part of.
yeah, that's a good point. Instead of officers.
Personnel, because we're not personnel.
Yeah.
Right, good point.
Or when they say personnel, they mean city employees.
Correct. Well, one would think. So, while I don't think that Section 38, I'm sorry, the second sentence of 37 is, it's not unimportant. I just don't think it belongs in that section.
And talking about a provision related to compensation of counselors or a prohibition on it without a vote, that's on one of our future agendas, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. So let's flag this one to talk at the same time.
Right.
And I think you're right. I think we're going to want to take this language, move it somewhere else, and then potentially add to it,
Well, I think you would put it under Chapter 3.
probably.
Well, it's probably here because it's the subject of compensation or merit increases, whatever, are considered personnel or human resources.
Right. But not for
If you
council.
move it and there's nothing under there, you don't need the section.
Right.
So I guess to the first part about what the city currently does or doesn't do in terms of compensation of employees, this might be a legal question of does adoption of a budget, which is developed with a projection of the compensation rates of each city employee, and the budget's adopted by the council, does that constitute fulfilling this? I suspect it probably does, but it might not be specific enough.
Yeah, the proposed budget that the Budget Committee and Council ultimately adopts includes proposed salaries for appointed officers based on contract. So
Yeah, those aren't the ones I'm worried about. It's and employees that I'm
Okay.
worried about. Because if you do it the way I think you do it, you adopt a budget and then you go into collective bargaining. And so when you adopt the budget, you would make assumptions about what compensation will be, but you don't have a list of names and dollar amounts as part of the budget.
no, there is a
You have
salary.
expectations.
There's a salary schedule that lists by salary, by position in the salary ranges, but it doesn't get that specific.
Right. And you may change it with a cost of living adjustment or
Mhm.
whatever you agree to in collective bargaining. So
But council would have to approve whatever we agree to in a collective bargaining agreement too, so they would be involved with
right.
approving.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that would be the question to get an answer back.
Yeah,
I'd
it's
rather
more
not
legal.
mess with this language. We don't have to, but if we don't think we're doing it legally, then we may have to. So if we can figure out if the council adopting a budget that encompasses compensation satisfies that.
I would really like to see less here, because my feeling is it's his job.
Yeah.
You know, he's the guy that we hired to be city manager. He's got a boatload of employees working for him. He's the one that ought to be able to say, I want to hire you for $12.99 an hour, or whatever,
Right.
you know, and dictate the terms of their employment, with the exceptions of Sylvia, the judge, the city attorney.
Right.
You
No,
know, the ones that are called out.
Yeah, I don't even know why it's in the charter,
Yeah, I really don't think it needs to be.
unless you want to reference labor.
Well, I'm in the same place that you are. Where that gets me is leave it the heck alone unless we absolutely have to touch it. Because my big fear would be if we go put this on the ballot, we have an argument about a whole different topic than
Oh, yeah.
what we're actually talking about.
Yeah, it may be language from the model charter that, hasn't been an issue, and we need to explore it, but
All right, that gets us to 33I, which is the removal from the council for interfering in operations language. This is in Chapter 8, appoint of officers also. 33I is on
page
page 6. And the full section, just for the record, no council member may directly or indirectly attempt to coerce the manager or a candidate for the office of manager in the appointment or removal of any city employee or in administrative decisions, period. Violation of this provision is grounds for removal from office by a majority of the council after a public hearing, period. In council meetings, councilors may discuss or suggest anything with the manager relating to city business. And in my mind, it's that middle sentence that's been the source of far more trouble than it's worth, frankly.
and from a professional standpoint, that's unique language. I've not seen that in other charters that I've looked at. It's very unique.
I think the first sentence is the issue of the council doesn't interfere with the manager in running things, to Brian's point. That is absolutely the way it should be. What do we think about dropping this?
Striking that sentence.
The sentence starts a violation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Part of the argument, and this is just an argument for removal of that, if a member of the council is doing that, which is cursing the manager or interfering, and that will be a public thing. That's why you have recalls.
Uh-huh.
To
Or
have
next
an
election
election,
or whatever.
or next elections, to have a majority of the council remove an official
An elected.
or an elected official seems pretty strong to me, and it hasn't happened here that I'm aware of, but it certainly is a topic of discussion because it's unique language.
And quite honestly, if the majority of the council felt that strongly about it, they'd have the power to remove the manager rather than removing the councilor. If the manager.
Well, they always have that power. so-
Right. But what I mean is, if they were feeling that he was being susceptible to influence, that would be cause
Sure.
to dismiss him.
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm
Well-
not sure.
Well,
I think there's a difference between coercion and influence. Remember, it doesn't take
Well, you're
seven. It
supposed to-
doesn't
you're
take
supposed
7
to.
votes to remove somebody. It only takes 4.
You're supposed to influence the city manager, right? I mean, that's.
Yeah,
Provide
that I'm not always successful. We just had this conversation earlier today, but it wasn't over city business. It was over something else. I mean, I think that this paragraph exists because politicians cross the line a lot, and it's not just with the office. Joe's office. It's often with line employees.
Mhm.
In engineering or public works or, we code compliance. You know, we have counselors who have in the past just called the head of that department directly and did bother to go through the office. So if I have a code issue or a neighbor with a code issue, I call him or I text him and say, I have an issue, I need to, can I contact Bill Collins and talk to him about this issue? And he'll say, yeah, go ahead. But a lot of people don't do that. And so there are direct and indirect ways to coerce not only the city manager, but other staff members. And I think that's why it's in there. I don't think it's well written. But I think that happens on a more regular basis is coerce the manager. I don't even know why candidate for the office of manager.
I'll vote to hire you as manager as long as you get rid of the police chief.
Right, exactly.
That would be that an example.
Yes. Yeah. Or like you agree to reduce expenses by 20% in the first 5 years. Normally what happens is...
that second thing I think you can do.
For the candidate?
Oh, I guess administrative decisions, okay.
Yeah, that's the thing that really, I think is something that politicians can do. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not, is to coerce the manager an administrative decision because they either don't like the decision or they want to, move the manager in a different decision, in a different path. So.
Yeah, I don't think there's any argument around the table that interference shouldn't happen. I think it's just that narrow, weird language that middle sentence,
right.
The anti-democratic language of
right.
Before counselors can decide enough, you're out of here.
And that
It doesn't
is,
even say for, it says a majority, right?
Well, I guess that's right.
yeah, and that's also listed in our council rules, is censure and removal.
All right, let's go ahead and add removal in a red line and take another look at that.
Okay.
And item H on our agenda, I think that's actually chapter 9. Rules and mechanisms relating to, I remember this one. This is the one that says, we may have already have talked about this actually.
I think we have.
Yeah.
Take over.
Yeah. All right, in that case, I think that gets us to looking at the schedule going forward. So this guy didn't answer any of them. Oh,
You were AWOL on all the emails.
well, I'm good for the first.
You mean today?
Yes, I mean today.
Are you sure?
Spoken like that.
Careful. We don't have any total winner. Oh, we do have a couple of June 19th and June 26th. Naturally. And Sylvia, what was our deadline for the last date for us to take action?
July the 10th is your last, not action, your last committee meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you guys want to hold the work session with the council on their scheduled July 15th meeting.
Got it, okay.
Yes. It gives you guys enough chance in August to do your work. It's a September deadline, isn't it?
Correct.
In some sense.
The ballot title has to be adopted by the council and
Oh, right.
submitted to me by August the 15th.
Right.
Notice.
Oh, state law.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we don't meet before. The filing deadline for Washington County is before we meet in September, right? I don't think so.
Washington County deadline is the 4th of
Yeah.
September.
So I can fill in my dates. I'm good on the 8th and the 15th, not on the 22nd, not on the 29th. Not on the 5th. Yes on the 12th. Yes on the 19th. Yes on the 26th. So the 22nd, we would miss Beth, and she would be the only one on that day. On the 29th, we'd miss, if we started at 7, we'd miss me, and I would be the only one. 19th and the 26th, we would have everyone, so those seem like for sure's.
A lot of people will be getting ready to go to town for 4th of July.
On the 3rd.
3-day weekend.
Didn't go that far down the list here. Yeah, I'm good on the
We have at least 4 no's on the 3rd of July already.
So I would say, it looks like 22nd and the 29th are dates that we should think about meeting, and the 19th of May. And the 19th and 26th of June.
Didn't you say you weren't available the 22nd and 29th?
I'm available, I'm not, I'm sorry, I didn't mean the, did I mean the 22nd?
I think you did.
I did, yeah, you're right.
Just think that-
No, it's the, one second. Yeah, I could do the 22nd. And we'd miss Beth. So-
She'll be there the 29th.
Yeah, so I would say if we did the 22nd and the 29th, we miss one person each of those days. And if we did the 19th and 26th, we wouldn't miss anybody those days. And every other day, we're missing at least 2 people.
And then keep in mind, Charlie isn't, we don't have Charlie's.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we want to tentatively try that? So that means on the 29th, you would need a chair.
So 22nd,
22nd and 29th.
Mm-hmm. And then the 19th, 26th of June,
okay.
and the 10th of July, and 15th work session with the council. And the 15th work session with the council, if we do it like we did it last time, it's great if people can be here, but it's not mandatory.
Yeah, hopefully most of our decisions would have been made by then, so.
Yeah, so it's mostly for conversation and
Right.
talking them through it. You want to roll that out and?
So May 22nd, May 29th, June 19th, and June 26th,
Mhm.
July 10th, and July 15th.
Yep.
You probably have already done this. Is this room available for all those nights? Or?
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
yes, it is. The only time this room is not available is May 8th and May 15th. And that was as of 2 days ago.
Okay.
Worked out well.
May 8th is that SURPAC and then the Community Development Block Grant?
Yeah, I think there's a DEQ, Frontier
Yeah, they're
Frontier
doing,
event on one of those days.
DEQ has given the results of the soil testing up on
Yep.
the farm.
The Ken Foster Farm.
Because we're in there with the Community Development Block Grant meeting in Washington County.
And then on May 22nd is a library event in this room.
Maybe we can make them have to come in here first. All right, I think
We
that
can
gives
also
us.
use the police station.
Right, if we needed to, but it sounds like we're okay. All right, I think that's what our schedule should look like. Anybody have anything for the general good?
One question.
Yeah.
Somewhere on all of our discussions here, I still think we lost compensation for city council.
No, I think that's on one of our next
Yeah, it
agendas.
is.
Oh, is it there our next agenda?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Future
Chapter
agenda.
3.
Okay, sorry about that then.
Yeah. And we'll add to it relocating this language about reimbursement of actual expenses.
Right. Just a reminder, if anybody's interested, budget is this month, so if you want to attend the budget committee meeting, you're absolutely invited.
It'll
And-
be released tomorrow. It'll be on the website tomorrow if you're interested.
And if anybody read The Archer, there's a link to Oregon Gov.
Oregon.gov.
Well, anyway, there's a link that was talked in The Archer about, and it has all of the Sherwood budget in it. And you
Yes.
can get the various tables, pie charts. It's actually kind of a fun little tool to play with.
And thank you for your note recently. It's only going to get better. It's very basic at this point. We want to get to the point where you'll be able to drill down to the city's checkbook and look at current spending and where we're spending our money. And it's a very, very cool tool.
I agree. I've been playing with these.
Yes.
Thank you. Anyway, that's all I had.
Okay. In that case, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Good.
I remember hearing a presentation